You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast for an exciting cricket-packed show. We have England's World Cup provisional squad being announced. There are some big names included, and there's a big name who didn't make the cut. Then we're going to talk
Ross
the
Leg.
100, the group stage. The group stage is wrapping up with the men's tournament going down to a nail-biter and the women's tournament showing clear best teams, 3 clear best teams. Then in part 2, Ross and Max get on the mic to talk with the co-owner of the Seattle Orcas, Soma Sega. And Ross, I'm going to go to you for a little preview of what that conversation was like.
Yeah, it was absolutely enlightening. Obviously, it was the inaugural season of Major League Cricket, and it was great to be able to talk to kind of one of the key investors, not only in Major League Cricket, but obviously also Seattle Orcas, and what's really happening kind of behind the scenes there, what you can expect from America cricket and kind of more global cricket, and then some of the parts around actually what does it take to set up something from scratch and actually build what is building a market in the United States. So really great interview, and it was good fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Ross, let's get straight into the action then with the 100. Not the 100. Let's do the World Cup squad first.
Okay.
It is, there was some relatively obvious calls. They've gone with Joss Buttler as captain. And then there were some sort of fringe ones. We'll run through the whole squad first, but let's do the headline first of all. Ben Stokes confirms his return to the squad. Harry Brook doesn't make the cut, and Jofra Archer is on travelling reserve duty. Which one of them surprised you the most? I mean, I know last week we sort of talked a little bit about Ben Stokes coming back, and we kind of knew that, and we speculated that Archer would be in. Didn't necessarily see Brook coming though, did we?
No, I kind of thought that Harry Brook is the second coming, right? He's the son that was promised to English cricket, and you can see that he's going to be an absolutely phenomenal player. I think that although he hit a century for Sunrisers in the IPL, I think probably some of his struggles there probably factored into it a little bit, and that might be. It's also why some of the other people in this team are actually a little bit surprising for me, and we can kind of get onto that in a minute. But yeah, I think Harry Brook is a really tough decision. But if you're picking between Ben Stokes and Harry Brook, I think you are picking Ben Stokes in ODI format. He's unfortunately just a proven entity. He's a World Cup winner pretty much single-handedly, right? And you sit there and say, at the end of the day, it's a hard one, but there's going to be 3 or 4 more World Cups for Harry Brook to play in, and there's no doubt that he'll be one of the first names on the team sheets when they come back round.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a surprise, and obviously Harry Brook goes and it's 100 in the 100 yesterday to kind of underline his credentials as a white ball player. I think you're more or less right. I think this is basically a case for England of not really knowing how or where Brook would fit into the 11, and if you look at the wider makeup of the team, how you could fit Brook in whilst also keeping a kind of balanced 11. So I'll run through the squad really quickly. It's provisional, so this might change. It's Joss Buttler as captain, Moeen Ali as vice captain. Then in pretty much alphabetical order, Gus Atkinson, Johnny Bairstow, Sam Curran, Liam Livingstone, Dawid Malan, Adil Rashid, Joe Root, Jason Roy, Ben Stokes, Reece Topley, David Willey, Mark Wood, and Chris Wokes. I think the one that stands out for me, I mean, rather than sort of Stokes coming back in to maybe edge out Brook, is probably Malan. But England's white ball setup, the guys kind of like him, and they think that I guess he could deputise for any one of the top 4 in that kind of cruiser role or as an opening batter, and he's got a little bit of history recently performing in both of those roles. And where I think Brook specifically makes sense to maybe keep him out of the squad is if you look at the 11, and I think this is probably the 11 they'll go with or something like this. Jason Roy, Bairstow, Root, Stokes, Livingstone, Buttler, Moeen, Curran, Wokes, Wood, and Rashid. If you run through that, and I've gone through it quite quickly, you've kind of got 4 bowlers there, and therefore a need to have 10 overs of bowling in your top 6 or top 7. Livingstone and Moeen Ali can provide that, and Root can provide that, and potentially you'll get an over or two out of Stokes here and there as the tournament, as we go through the tournament. Maybe we'll see that. We don't know. Harry Brook doesn't really. I know Stokes did bowl him in the Ashes. He doesn't really provide anything with the ball, and I think England lining up like that are probably going to need guys in the top 6, top 7 who are dependable bowling options, and that's where they'll have to pick Moeen and Livingston, and that reduces the number of batting slots number of slots for pure batters down to probably 4. They're occupied by Roy, Bairstow, Root, Stokes, who are better than Butler, and I guess they've made better than Brook. And then I guess they've made the call that Brook is not as versatile as Malan. That's my thoughts on how they've got there.
Yeah, and I also think that Dawid Malan's also proven himself over the last 2 years or so, being in that white ball setup. Like, he's hit a couple of really important centuries. He's won England a couple of games in the kind of tricky conditions as well, and kind of demonstrated his worth. I absolutely love Jason Roy. I think he's been a great servant for England, but there is a question mark here around the game is going to be played in India. You talk there around the balance of the team and kind of getting over some different people, and how good people are against spin, etc. And I think we've seen Jason Roy improve against spin, but is there the big body of evidence over the last 12 to 18 months to say that Jason Roy is our best ODI opening batsman? I think he's done okay in parts, but also went through that serious downturn, and I just think that we are being very, very cautious, I think, by picking a lot of the players who went and won it in England before. And I do think that some of the other white ball players have actually potentially gone ahead of him. I was surprised not to see someone like Ben Duckett in this side. Absolutely brilliant against spin, left-handed option. I think we speculated a few months ago, Jack, that he might be the person to kind of replace Owen Morgan's type role in that space. That hasn't come to fruition. And then kind of probably maybe a bit more an outsider's perspective, but someone like Will Jacks in that space does offer a little bit with the ball, is explosive, kind of has probably been taught a thing or two by Jason Roy in that space. But they're trusting the seniority and they're trusting kind of the old guard in this space. And I don't think you can challenge it too much, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind Roy. Roy's batted well in ODIs for the last year, more or less, and he's got a pretty good record in the subcontinent as well. So I get where you're coming from. There is an age thing here with some of the England players. I think Jason Roy's one of them. I think Moeen Ali's the other one, who probably is some way over the peak in terms of the age curve. But then both of them bring pluses as well. The attitude Roy's going to bring, and that Moeen is a dependable bowling option. And whilst in his case the batting really does seem to have dropped off somewhat, that versatility and dependability could be pretty crucial. So it's an interesting squad. The other probably reasonably significant talking points are that Jofra Archer doesn't make the team. You surprised by that at all? There was a lot of talk that he might be fit, going along as a travelling reserve. What do you think?
I think England have played with fire a little bit too often with kind of picking people who aren't entirely fit on some of these things. I think taking him as a travelling reserve is a good thing to do if he does have kind of the right body, right? We know he's got problems with his elbow, problems with his back. So I think it was the right decision to take him along, but not name him in the 15. Obviously, Atkinson's done reasonably well this year and bowls rapid. But again, do we have what we need in that lineup with kind of some of the people we've got? I think it's good that Topley's back in the side. I think he's done well for England. But yeah, if Archer does get fit, then yeah, he's one of the key bowlers for us in ODI cricket.
Yeah, I sort of tend to agree with you that unless you are guaranteeing that he will be able to play 6 of the 12 matches or 11 matches that you want to play, then you're maybe better off picking somebody who isn't as good but will be able to fulfill that role, and that's probably Atkinson / Topley, and platooning, if you like, with Wood and Wokes and the others who Again, I mean, there is definitely an age element to this England side. It's a pretty
There's a
good
lot of
team.
experience. There's a lot of experience, and that's what I mean. We're kind of trying to pick holes in this, right? We're talking about a bunch of World Cup winners. We're talking about some of the highest paid players on some of the franchise circuit as well. And yeah, it's a very, very strong team. You see that the makeup of it, kind of what, four certain all-rounders in Joe Root, Liam Livingstone, Moeen Ali, and Sam Curran. Then you've obviously got people like Adil Rashid. He's got 6 first-class centuries, don't you know, or whatever it is. It brings up every single time. David Willey, Chris Wokes, they can all bat, and I think that's the makeup of the side. So I think it's exciting times. But I'm a horses for courses type selector, and yeah, will this team excel in India? Maybe, maybe not. I think.
I don't mind it. I mean, I think my take on white ball cricket is that it is much more similar wherever you go, and I think India will have a slight home advantage, and you might see Pakistan benefiting from condition familiarity, and possibly also Sri Lanka. But I think basically the best 11 is likely to be the favourite for the tournament, and I think England's best 11 probably comes in quite close second behind India's at the moment, albeit with the caveat that we don't really know what 11 India will name, and that there is the possibility that they kind of shoot themselves in the foot to some extent with whatever they go. Anyway, Ross, let's transfer over to the 100. We'll start, I think, with the women's side, where we have 3 teams at the top who will be playing in the semi-final and then the final. On Saturday, it'll be the Welsh Fire v the Northern Superchargers. Then on Sunday, the winner of that at Lords, we said the winner of that will go to Lords to play Southern Brave. There's a 4-point difference, a 4-point gap between the team in third and the team in fourth. So I think we can fairly safely say here that these are the 3 best teams. Also, I was looking through the stats earlier. 8 of the 11 top run scorers from the tournament play for these 3 teams. So I think there is definitely, at least at the top end on the batting side, there is definitely a little bit more quality among these 3 than there has been among the other 5. Ross, I'm going to ask you to call it now. Northern Superchargers, Phoebe Litchfield and the gang taking on Welsh Fire, who have had this resurgent season. Who is going to Lords? What's the result of that going to be?
I think the Superchargers have obviously played well, but I can't see past. I really like the Welsh Fire this year. I think they've played some really interesting cricket. I think there's some good narratives in there. Obviously, Hartley's retiring as well. And this is kind of the final kind of games for her. So I think, as with all these things, it's such a shootout, and I prefer Welsh Fire getting to the final, where they will inevitably lose to Southern Brave.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like the Welsh Fire as well. I think they've got a couple of good narrative arcs going on beyond Hartley retiring too. You've got one of the top wicket takers in the tournament, the fastest bowler, Shabnim Ismail, who is always a riot to watch. And then Tammy Beaumont 3.0, I've heard her referred to. So in the third stage of her career, obviously dropped from the England T20 side. Has been absolutely lighting it up. It's fair to say in the 100 this season. So potentially sort of like a redemption arc for her as well, or at least like a kind of, I don't know if it's revenge on the selectors for not picking her, because it's not against England, is it? But like it's one of those Johnny Bairstow style. Obviously, he plays for the men's side, so that's a nice thematic tie in there. One of those one of those kind of like stick a middle finger up to all your haters performances from her. Whoever wins that, Ross, will take on Southern Brave in the final on Sunday.
Yeah,
they have been good. They've won 7 out of 8, which is...
They've been good since the inception of the 100. They have literally been the best women's team. And you look at the makeup of their side, they are strong in every department. And I think they play some really, really, really positive cricket. And I find it very, very difficult to look past them for this. In terms of franchises, and I think on one of the previous podcasts you were talking about kind of how good the Oval Invincibles men's side are, right, in terms of the franchise position. This Southern Brave team for the women is a thing to be feared for whoever ends up meeting them in the final.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got George Adams with 20 wickets in the tournament, which is pretty obscene over an 8-match comp, particularly when you're only bowling 20 balls per innings. So that's like a maximum of 160 balls to take 20 wickets. Can you work out the strike rate on that off the top of your head? Is it eight? I think something like that. It's nonsense. Might not be 8. It's low. And then Smriti Mandana, 324 runs. Danny Wyatt in there as well, and Maya Boucher all piling on. That's a pretty good outfit. I would say. Ross, the men's side. Now we don't know exactly what's going to happen with this, so we're going to have to speculate on who will make the final, and then try and come up with some talking points for the semi-final. Welsh Fire are sitting in pole position, but there is a shootout this evening, isn't there, between the Manchester Originals and Southern Brave? Maybe not quite a shootout. Sorry, let me get the actual table up here.
Welsh Fire are in third. Manchester Originals are in second, and then in pole position is Oval Invincibles.
So that's what I mean. It's not quite a shootout. Southern Brave, if they win, will leapfrog Welsh Firemen, unless something weird happens and the Manchester Originals net run rate gets bombed. So I don't know what that is. It's not a Mexican standoff. It's a Welsh standoff. I'm not sure. But there's a couple of teams that could go through. Ross, I've really enjoyed the Welsh Fire redemption. Are they going to be left ruining that tie against Oval Invincibles from earlier in the tournament, where Tom Curran pulled out the world's biggest dive to get the game to a tie?
I think they could well be. I think Southern Brave are a really interesting outfit, right? And they have typically focused on their kind of bowling prowess to, one, get them to the title, and then two, to try and defend that. But I think in the position that they're in now is that they are just as likely to win as Manchester Originals, I think, in this position. So I think we're in for a really good game this evening. And I'm going to turn it on after we finish recording this podcast to give it a good watch.
We don't know who. Obviously, we don't know who will win. We do know that Manchester Originals will likely be one of the semi-finalists. So it could be a repeat of tonight's match, or it could be them v Welsh Fire. Of the three, Welsh Fire obviously not Welsh Fire. Manchester Originals obviously sitting in second. Is that a position that they deserve to be in? I mean, we saw them at the Oval, and I would say they didn't look too hot that night. But then Phil Salt has sort of started to turn up, and there's the Butler factor. They're an interesting team.
Yeah, and I think they've got the experience. I think we were talking about the England squad earlier, but I think this team, they do have the experience they've got there. Phil Salt, another one who's probably a little bit unlucky not to be considered for the World Cup squad in that shout. But I think they offer enough from a batting perspective, and if they get off to a fly, and you saw it with Joss Butler and Phil Salt the other night, putting on a significant partnership to win them the game. And I think that is the piece at the moment. You've seen the new ball kind of move around more in this edition of the 100, which I do think has been the best men's edition of the 100 this season. There's been loads of close games. There's been some real quality cricket, although I think people are starting to figure it out. But if you can get your good returns from your openers, it's a massive boon. And that's what Manchester Originals really have to offer.
Yeah, it's kind of a quirk that's going to happen before the knockout round of this year's 100, because I think with World Cup preparations underway, a few players are sort of departing. So Tim David's off, Spencer Johnson's off, Adam Zampa are leaving, and these are players that would have featured or are in teams that are going to make the playoffs. So they've changed the rules so that teams will be able to sign an emergency replacement. So we'll see what happens, because some players are going to come in literally to complete the 15-man squads. I don't know if they'll get anyone good. It might just be like a guy from Surrey that's kicking around. Maybe they can field a bit or something like that. Or maybe we'll see some transfer deadline day style swoops from Oval Invincibles.
It'd be good if they did someone in the crowd. If you got the ticket, if you're there already, you know what? We need a number 7, and you're going to get to bowl one set, and then whoever does something in the crowd, that'd be great. So I'm going to the final on Sunday, actually. So
yeah.
To go there.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, Oval Invincibles, they'll lose a couple of players for that, but probably still going to be the favourites. You'd think overall. Their domestic core is pretty strong.
Yeah, I think so. I think they've demonstrated that they know how to win in this competition and also avoid losing, as you say, with a Tom Curran dive. And I think that Sam Curran has led the team reasonably well. They've not only hammered home kind of that home advantage where they possibly could do, but also learned how to win away. So they'll have to do that at Lords. But I think a lot of the players will be champing at the bit to kind of get there. And whoever they come up against, it's going to be, I think, an absolutely fantastic final. And I can't wait to be watching it.
Absolutely. And last talking point from the men's side, I think, is the kind of demise of the Birmingham Phoenix. Not demise, but the bomb year for the Birmingham Phoenix going into the tournament. I saw your prediction was that they would win the comp, Ross. So can you give us any insight into what's gone wrong for Birmingham? Because on paper, this is a pretty good team.
Yeah, I think it's one of those pieces that you see when you have to live by the sword and die by the sword, I think sometimes. And I think when you've got such a short window, I think when stuff goes against you a little bit and some players are kind of coming back from form or coming back into form or coming back from injury, there's those bits that sometimes just don't click into place. I think both sides have struggled, both in the men's and the women's, and I think it's just one of those quirks of playing franchise cricket. I'm not sure it's let's rip up everything and start over. I think it's just a case of no, we're going in, we're playing a really aggressive brand of cricket. We're going to do our level best to put pressure on the opposition. And unfortunately, the bit I was talking about earlier around losing early wickets has actually haunted them in this regard. And that's what's unfortunately happened to them in this edition of the 100.
Yeah, I'm looking at the top run scorers now. Butler leads the way with 253. He feels like he's had kind of a quiet season, but it's not bad, is it? 253.
I think what we said at the start was just like, so Josh Butler's going to finish top. I mean, you're not going to realise that he finishes top, and who's going to be the next best? He's a freak. He's an absolute freak.
To place Birmingham in context, they don't have anyone in the top 20. I think Jamie Smith's their top run scorer with only 139 runs, and then Duckett has 123. So it's been a really lean year with the bat. I'm going to say it. I think that it's Ben Duckett's fault. So I think that Birmingham Phoenix, they're a team built around the idea of strike rate and going hard early, and they've got a lot of players in that mold. The one guy who stands out that sort of isn't like that is a more of an anchor type batsman is Duckett, and because he hasn't really managed to accumulate any runs, they've been completely unstable. I mean, they haven't got anyone batting for stability in that whole side, and they've got nobody who has decided to take on that role I decided to take on that role after Duckett's failures. So I think they're an anchor light. And the reason they're an anchor light is that the anchor that they have hasn't really done anything. So that's my take on Birmingham.
I wouldn't disagree, I don't think. And I think that's the bit where it kind of comes with a really shortened season. Like, all it takes is a few bad games and you're already behind. They lost a couple of games to rain as well, right at the start of the competition. And sometimes I know that you don't believe in momentum and that kind of stuff, but winning definitely is a habit, especially in these kind of things. So I think that slow start, other teams being up and running, I think it just had a detrimental piece, and sometimes their luck's just not in.
Yeah, on the plus side, they are the only team to beat Oval Invincibles. So,
go on, the Oranges.
They can take that with them, can't they? Ross, we're just going to wrap up part one of the show now, but quickly we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors, manscaped.com. We are the proud owners of the new beard kit. It comes with the beard shaver, the hedger, your oil, your balms, all of this kind of gear, a comb. We're both quite short trimmers, I would say.
Yeah.
Like I'm not at comb length, but Max sometimes he grows it out, and the beard comb will be in play for the big man. We can vouch them 100%. We love the equipment that they've given us. Lawnmower, also a top piece of kit, and we're happy to be able to help you out. You can use the code CricketPod for 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Once more, use the code CricketPod, and this is in the show notes. You can go and just copy and paste this, click the link, code CricketPod, 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Ross, any final words on the cricket before we go over to the interview?
No, I just want to say on the interview, it was an absolute pleasure, and I think you'll find it very, very interesting actually to hear all about Major League Cricket and what goes on behind the scenes, and we look forward to getting your feedback. So if you do like the show, please do leave a review on iTunes or press the 5-star button on Spotify, whatever it is. And if you're watching us on YouTube, then obviously click like, click subscribe, and if you love us that much, go to patreon.com/The Cricket Pod and get involved with our Discord and everything else that comes with it.
All right. See you later, everyone. Bye-bye.